My name is Olivia Parker. I'm 27 years old, living in Portland, Oregon, a city where rain paints the sidewalks silver and coffee shops fill every block like anchors for people searching for warmth. I rent a small apartment above a bookstore, the kind of place that smells like ink and paper even when you're upstairs in the living room. For most of my 20s, life felt scattered. I had tried different jobs, assistant at a design firm, part-time barista, and even a few months working in event planning, but nothing ever felt permanent. Stability wasn't my strong suit, and I was beginning to think maybe I wasn't meant to have it. And then I met Harold Bennett. Harold is 58, a retired history teacher who spent 3 decades teaching at a local high school before stepping away to take care of his wife during her long battle with illness. After she passed away 2 years ago, he found himself lonely in a house too big for one man. I met him in the most ordinary of ways through the bookstore downstairs. It started with a simple question. One rainy morning, Harold came in looking for a book about American railroads. I was sipping coffee at the counter, and since the owner, Mrs. Collins, knew I was obsessed with history myself, she waved me over. "Olivia, help them out, will you?" That's how our first conversation began, with dusty shelves, the smell of old books, and 2 people who had no reason to meet otherwise. Harold was polite, his voice steady, but there was a weariness about him, the kind you see in people who have carried too many memories. I walked him to the history section, pulled out a thick book, and before I knew it, we were talking about far more than railroads. We spoke about history, travel, Portland in the 70s, and even how much the city had changed. That conversation spilled into another, and then another. Pretty soon, I found myself waiting for Harold's visits. He didn't come every day, but when he did, I felt something I couldn't explain, a calmness, a quiet companionship. The secret we share every morning didn't begin with anything dramatic. It began with coffee. One morning, I stepped out of my apartment at 7:30 a.m., balancing a thermos in my hand, and nearly bumped right into Harold. He was standing outside, holding his own mug, watching the bookstore door as if waiting for it to open. "Good morning," I said, startled. "Good morning," he replied with that small, patient smile of his. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd walk a little. This place feels less empty when the lights start coming on." That morning, instead of walking away, I stood beside him, sipping coffee. We didn't talk much, just watched the street come alive with joggers, cars, and the smell of fresh pastries from the bakery across the street. From then on, mornings became our unspoken ritual. At 7:30 a.m., without calling, texting, or planning, we'd meet on the corner outside the bookstore. He with his old chipped mug, me with my thermos. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we stood in silence. But slowly, I realized what we were doing. We were stitching pieces of peace into each other's lives. Our secret wasn't scandalous or dramatic. It was something deeper. It was the quiet bond between 2 people of different ages who understood that companionship doesn't always need explanations. But of course, life doesn't stay simple. People notice things. One day, my best friend Rachel asked, "Liv, who's the man you've been standing with every morning? I see you 2 from my bus." I laughed it off. "That's Harold. He's just a friend." "A 58-year-old friend you wait for at 7:30 a.m. sharp?" she teased. "Sounds like a Hallmark movie." I brushed her off, but her words stuck with me. Because yes, Harold and I had an age gap, one that people could easily misinterpret. But what they didn't know was the truth of what those mornings meant. For Harold, it was about easing the silence of his house. For me, it was about finding consistency for the first time in years. Over months, our mornings grew into something bigger. He began bringing old photographs of Portland from the 70s, showing me the movie theaters that no longer existed and the diners that used to be crowded on weekends. I, in turn, shared parts of my life, dreams of writing, fears of failure, stories of my chaotic 20s. Once, I asked him why he always carried the same chipped mug instead of buying a new one. He told me it was his late wife's mug, the one she used every morning. "It feels wrong to leave it in a cupboard," he said softly. That morning, I realized something. Harold wasn't just sharing coffee with me. He was sharing memories, allowing someone else to hold space where grief lived. Then came the day everything nearly changed. It was a stormy Tuesday when Harold didn't show up. I stood outside in the rain, clutching my thermos, waiting until my hair was damp and my shoes were soaked. 15 minutes passed.
20.
No Harold.
Panic set in.
I called Mrs. Collins, the bookstore owner, and asked if she had Harold's number. She hesitated, then gave it to me. I called, no answer. Finally, I ran to his house, 3 blocks away, heart pounding. When he opened the door, looking pale and exhausted, relief washed over me. He'd caught a bad case of the flu and had been too weak to walk. Without thinking, I stepped inside, made him tea, and fussed over his blankets. He chuckled weakly. "You're acting like I'm 90. You scared me," I admitted. That was the first time I realized just how much our mornings meant to me. Not just as routine, but as something I couldn't imagine losing. After he recovered, our bond deepened. People kept talking, some curious, some judgmental. But we stopped caring. What mattered was that every morning we shared something real: time, trust, and understanding. One morning, as the sun rose, Harold said something I'll never forget. "You know, Olivia, people spend their lives chasing big things: money, fame, recognition. But sometimes, the rarest thing is finding someone you can share quiet mornings with." That sentence became the anchor of my life. Years may pass, our lives may change, but those mornings remain etched into me. Not because of romance, not because of anything dramatic, but because they proved something simple. Connection doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't follow rules about age, background, or circumstance. It just happens, and if you're lucky, you notice it before it slips away. So yes, I am 27, and Harold is 58. And the secret we share every morning is simple but powerful. We meet, we drink coffee, we share silence, stories, and memories. And that will always leave me speechless, because in a world so loud, finding someone to be silent with is the rarest gift of all.